Hello everyone, Stephen Davey Davis here. I have not done a market update lately, and today is that time. We won't be talking about the state of the market right at this moment, but rather we're going to be talking about some market implications through a very hot topic in Fayette County. So sorry if you don't live in Fayette County, but still may be interesting to you. But we're going to be talking about market implications in Fayette County via ADUs. ADU is an acronym for Accessory Dwelling Unit. Today, I went to the public hearing with the Planning Commission of our county. There were lots of things discussed today, but the main thing and the main reason why there were so many people there was because of this ADU piece of the agenda. So it started out with a gentleman representing I guess the group of people who have done all of this studying. They studied several cities across the United States, among them Durham, North Carolina, Fayetteville, Arkansas, San something, California. I can't remember which saint it was, but one of the cities out in California, just trying to figure out how their accessory dwelling unit ordinances have worked over the amount of time they've existed in those locales, and then figuring out how would that look here, what would the impact of the community be, all of that kind of stuff. I cannot remember what his name was, but his whole part of this ADU discussion was to show what the intention is, where the research came from, and essentially what is going to be in this ordinance. Ordinance ZOTA 2019-5. It's all about the ADUs. So his stated intention, I'm paraphrasing and giving a synopsis, was that this is intended to provide long-term living on existing parcels of land. So we're talking, there's a house on whatever amount of acreage or square footage, and then this ordinance is talking about a structure that is added to that parcel of land, something that is not attached to the house. So he is saying that this ordinance is for long-term living, that it is not for bolstering the economy of the Airbnbs of the world, the VRBOs, that kind of thing, that it's for long-term living, specifically in keeping in mind the aging population, so giving them a different avenue of independent living that doesn't necessarily require them to be, in basically a senior dorm or a nursing home or that kind of thing. And also in interest of adult children who have, the facilities to live on their own somewhat, but their cognitive disabilities prevent them from being completely independent. So, giving that population of people some independence without having to be too far away from their parents or their caregivers who have primary guardianship for them. And then third, just providing more affordable housing. We're growing as a county rapidly, and there are lots of whispers or maybe shouts that housing will become more and more expensive here. And so standalone ADUs, accessory dwelling units, would provide people the ability to have a different option to live. They could buy an ADU, they could buy one of these separate dwellings and perhaps even live in a neighborhood that is otherwise out of their price range, but now they can afford to live there because it's a smaller home, it's completely separate and all of that. So those are the intentions. In terms of what's in the zone ordinance, or the ZOTA 2019-5 about ADUs, there's a lot that's in it. Namely, some of the top hits from that part of his conversation were that anything that be attached would be limited at 800 square feet. So if you wanted to add on and then call it an accessory dwelling unit, then it would only be able to be 800 square feet large. For detached units, the limit for how close it can be to a property line is 18 inches. So you can essentially move these units within 18 inches of your property line if you built an ADU after the hypothetical passing of this ordinance. The owner occupancy is not required so long as the property is long-term rented. If you are trying to be all Airbnb about it, then the owner is required to live in one of the dwellings. Like, you can't just Airbnb both places. You would essentially have to live in the principal house, and then you'd be able to short-term rental, kind of. That stuff gets complicated. A lot of it is to be determined, and frankly, it was a recurring theme for the second half of this public hearing. So recap, this guy, his people, they did a study, they came out with a guide, a proposed ordinance. The intention is to provide mixed housing, to provide more independence for the aging population, and for people who are semi-independent in their living, maybe because of various cognitive or physical disabilities that they have. The inclusions in the ordinance essentially are supposed to only promote long-term rental versus the short-term rental like Airbnb. Stated differently, it's not supposed to help Airbnb be easier. And there are some things about materials and styles that is pretty broad because all of our neighborhoods look different. But you can read more about this later if you are really that interested. What I found interesting was the amount of people that came out to speak. 47, in fact, and I did not stay for all of it, but people from various neighborhood associations and other citizen-run planning committees and organizations, and even the Fayette Alliance, they had a spokesperson, I believe it was their president, come out and speak about it. So she started, and her take seemed to not be in support or opposition. It was more of if this is going to be something you do, you need to include the community in the conversation every step of the way. You need to be communicating with them. That's the only way that this has the chance to be as successful as the proponents are saying it will be. So sort of a very neutral stance, a very sensible stance, and it was what it was. And everyone after her, we had representatives from the Stonewall Board of Directors, the Ashland Park Neighborhood Association, the president from the Fayette County Neighborhood Council spoke, and many others after these. But everyone that I saw while I was there was very unequivocally against passing this ordinance. Among the concerns were the fact that this ordinance, the way that it is being proposed right now, today, is that 8 people that are unrelated would be able to reside on a parcel of land. And so from there, folks wonder about, well, what does parking look like on my street if someone decides to have an ADU, or 5 people decide to have ADUs on my street? How does that work? We're not going to widen all of the streets. Also, just general noise and privacy. And then there were some health concerns about, groundwater being contaminated by new development, and, the level to which new sewer systems were added on to existing sewer systems, and how that may affect the public's health in a bad way. Other concerns really revolved around our student population and the fact that UK has very famously had issues housing all of their students, and some people just plain don't want a bunch of students living in their neighborhood. They say that's what campus is for. We realize that we have an educational community, but I choose to live in X neighborhood because I don't want to be close to UK like that. I want to live in more of a traditional neighborhood where there are non-students. I mean, because neighborhoods are filled with all kinds of people, but a lot of people choose to live where they do in our county because its proximity is not so UK related. So people were very concerned about student housing. People were also concerned about, you know, environmental aspects such as the tree canopy. There were some people speaking before we talked about ADUs that I'm not entirely clear where the trees came into play, but it was also a recurring theme. And then finally, at the heart of it all, it's sort of like a government power type of conversation where the passing of this ordinance essentially makes it that all you've got to do is get a building permit in order to build or add on to your house. As it stands today, there was an ordinance put in place in 2012 where if you want to change your property in that massive kind of way, you've got to petition the government for that, and then there's a process for your immediate neighbors to have input on, you know, how it may advantageously affect them or how it may affect them to their detriment, in order for the government to decide that someone can or cannot make this add-on or make this detached structure become a reality on a piece of land. With this new ordinance, all of that would go away. And so a lot of people are very concerned about not having a say in their neighborhoods, how their neighborhoods look, how their neighborhoods feel, the vibe of them, the parking, the fact that if it's passed, you just do what you want. You apply for the building permit, you pay for it, and then you start to do construction within the confines of the law, you know, all of the normal law stuff, running water, that kind of thing. But really, really interesting thing to keep your eye on. It has the potential to really affect everyone. And depending on how and if this ordinance is passed, it has the potential to affect you negatively or positively. So without being super political, your local politics are really, really important. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. I think a lot of people just sort of gloss over that when we think about the big picture, which is important, but how you live your life every day usually comes down to your local, your county, and to a lesser extent, your state government. So this has the potential to affect your everyday life. I'd say keep an eye on it. It could make us a lot of money. It could tank some neighborhoods. We don't know. The conversation is continuing. I believe the next hearing is in October about this, either October or April. Next meeting date is... They're all in October. I can't tell which one will be discussing ADUs. Try lexingtonky.gov, and hopefully you've learned something today and you've got a bug in your ear about something that could potentially affect the way that you live your life. So for now, I'm out. I'm going to go on a double date and I'm going to eat some really good food. Have a great, great evening. Peace.